How movies shape our lives. Hi, how are you? So this week I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, The Rewatchables. It's my favorite movie podcast. And they were talking about the 2004 movie Sideways. And I love this movie. It stars Paul Giamatti and Thomas Hayden Church and Virginia Madsen and Sandra Oh. And Paul Giamatti and Thomas Hayden Church's characters go up into the wine country of Southern California and they get into all kinds of wacky, funny, crazy adventures. And they're going to go on a date with Virginia Madsen and Sandra Oh, and Miles, Paul Giamatti's character, says, if they order any merlot, I am leaving. I am not drinking any merlot. And the podcast pointed out that when that happened, when the movie was released, it actually caused a drop in merlot sales. And because the character of Miles also likes pinot, P-I-N-O-T, pinot. No, that's quinoa. How do you say pinot? Clearly I don't drink wine. Pinot. Because Miles likes Pinot, sales supposedly increased in Pinot the next year 16%, to the point where wine Pinot makers could not keep up with the increase in demand. And so this is what they were talking about on the podcast, and it got me to thinking, this happened, this was such a big deal that it was actually named the Merlot effect, or the Sideways effect, because this one line that was said in a movie caused a ripple effect through popular culture of I guess Merlot is bad. That's what people were thinking after this, and Pinot is good. And so it got me thinking about, wow, what an effect movies can have on our culture. And I started thinking about this, and it reminded me of in 1986 when the movie Top Gun came out. And after Top Gun came out, man, everybody was getting buzz cuts and they started wearing sunglasses like aviator glasses. And I guess this is what the internet said, that recruitment into the U.S. Navy increased 500% after Top Gun came out, because people wanted to join the U.S. Navy to become fighter pilots and be as cool as Tom Cruise. And man, I remember that happening, and it gets me thinking of just what an influence movies are, and TV shows and books can have on popular culture, just from one line or a whole movie. We get involved in the movie and it just changes us, or like one line changes us. And that got me thinking, so like Seinfeld, it affects our behavior, it affects our interests, and it affects our language, and it affects the way we buy things. So as far as language goes, I mean, Seinfeld came out on the TV show in the 90s, and everybody started talking like Seinfeld, saying yada, 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 and sponge-worthy, and master of my domain, and things like that. And then Jaws made us all afraid to go in the water, and E.T. got us to buy Reese's Pieces, and Karate Kid made everybody want to take karate. And the 1960s Star Trek, Captain Kirk is talking on his flip phone, right? So that inspired the makers of phones to make the flip phone. So we all thought we were like in Star Trek, technology has finally reached Star Trek level. And so that influence. And then the Holiday movie, where Kate Winslet and Cameron Diaz switch houses, so house swapping became a thing. And Cocktail, everybody wanted to spin bottles like Tom Cruise. Twisters, I'm curious if anybody became storm chasers after seeing the movie Twister or Twisters. I really love the movie Twisters, the sequel. That was such an unexpectedly well done sequel. Anyway, made storm chasing sound exciting. And Legally Blonde, did that make people want to join law school? Ferris Bueller, did that make people want to take days off? And When Harry Met Sally, did that make people want to fake O's in public restaurants? I remember when Back to the Future came out that I totally wanted a DeLorean. And then when Ghostbusters came out, I totally wanted to live in a firehouse. And the Breakfast Club made detention on Saturdays seem really cool. So, it can totally have an effect on us. And not just TV and movies, but books too. I mean, 50 Shades of Grey, when that came out, I don't have an opinion about 50 Shades of Grey either way, the movie or the books, but I read that, sales of that book was like 100 million copies of that book was sold. And I guess it inspired people to explore new areas of their love life that they hadn't explored before. And it's just really interesting how stuff affects other stuff. And checking my notes very subtly. I lost my place. I'll get it. Oh yeah, okay. So that gets me thinking about this other thing where you see something in a movie, and because a famous actor does it, or you see it done in a movie, it seems like, well, that's a normal thing to do. That's okay. That's acceptable behavior because that character did it in that movie. I mean, I remember seeing interviews with Michael Douglas, and he was in the movie Wall Street that came out in 86, 85. And he was the bad guy of the movie, and he was a stock trader on Wall Street. And he was doing interviews where he said, after the movie came out, for decades, people would come up to me and say, I joined Wall Street and became a stockbroker because you inspired me in that movie. And Michael Douglas was saying in the interview, it's like, I was the villain. How did I inspire you? But I guess, he made stock trading seem so much fun, And if you can make a job or something seem fun, I mean, Ferris Bueller made taking a day off seem really fun. And I bet that inspired people. And also, we get emotional about things. I mean, like Top Gun, the spectacle, the music, the emotion, the characters. I mean, we got emotionally involved in that movie. And I bet that when we get emotional, that kind of lowers us down into, well, I don't know if it lowers it, but it makes us more vulnerable to be influenced. If we, kind of makes us into kind of mushy clay that you can mold us a little bit more with if you get us emotional. And that can be good, and that can be maybe not good. I don't know. It just gets me thinking about that. And, also the thing is we imitate what we see. I remember so many times, before I get to that, imitate what we see. So one of the reasons I'm doing this YouTube channel, and one of the reasons I enjoy doing social media is because of the movie Pump Up the Volume. Christian Slater, and I don't know if you've seen it, because sometimes it's hard to find this movie, because I don't know if it's streaming on platforms, but I have it on DVD. And it came out in 1989. It's about Christian Slater in his parents' basement, and he hooks up some pirate radio thing, some equipment, some ham radio thing that he could somehow broadcast his voice on an AM or FM channel throughout Phoenix, Arizona, I think is set. And he starts doing these nighttime broadcasts, and all the high school students are tuning in, listening to this. He was the first podcaster. And man, he just made it look so cool. And so, doing this YouTube thing, of course, he didn't have the camera, but doing the internet and Instagram and the YouTube thing, I'm kind of living my Pump Up the Volume fantasy. And, because that movie still influences me, and I kind of want to imitate it. And when I was growing up, I would imitate Indiana Jones and Star Wars. I'd come home and I'd pick up a stick and I'd pretend it was a lightsaber. Or Raiders of the Lost Ark came out in 80? I was 9, and I lived on a farm, and we had a hay barn and huge stacks of baled hay on either side of the hay barn. And there was this long trench, it's tunnel between the hay bales that you could walk through. And I would walk in pretending I was Indiana Jones on some adventure, infiltrating a ancient tomb as I walked into the hay barn. And I'd get a rope and I'd swing from the rafters, and that's what you do. You see a cool movie when you're a kid, and you just want to imitate it. And that leads me to the story of the Dukes of Hazzard. So I remember when I was 9, I was a big fan of the Dukes of Hazzard TV show. You know, Bo and Luke Duke. They lived on a farm like I did, and they had this really cool car, and they drove it around, and they climbed in and out of the windows, and they climbed all over the cars, and they launched the car into the air, and man, it was cool. And I wanted to be like Bo and Lou Duke, and so I had some cowboy boots, and my father had spent a few years restoring some 1950s classic cars to pristine condition. And I bet you can see where this is going. So I would sneak into his car barn, and I would get in the cars and roll down the windows, and I would climb in and out of the windows of his 1950s classic restored cars. I would tumble all around the rooftop, and I would, crawl all around the hood, pretending that, the car was, in motion, and I'd crawl in the window and drive it, and man, it was so fun, and I had no idea that I was doing anything wrong at all. Until one day, my father went out to get one of his old cars because he wanted to drive it on Christmas Day to our grandparents' house, and he saw all the scuff marks and scratches and dents that I made in 2 or 3 of his cars. And, he remained surprisingly calm, but it was made very clear to me that what I had done was not a good thing, and being influenced by TV is not always a good idea, especially when you cause $3,000 worth of damage to your antique cars with your cowboy boots. And I was never allowed to watch the Dukes of Hazzard ever again. And so, that's my Dukes of Hazzard story. And, what also influenced me was James Dean. When I was in my first year of college, I had just started acting. I was really excited to explore acting. And James Dean, I had discovered his movies, Rebel Without a Cause, East of Eden, and Giant. And I was a huge James Dean fan. And I was like, yeah, that's how an actor should be. Man, I wanted to be James Dean and act real cool. And so I read every book about James Dean, had posters of James Dean, and I got to go to New York in 1991 and visit my sister who was living there. And I remember I had her take me to Times Square, and I wanted to reenact a famous picture of James Dean walking through Times Square in New York. And so I've got these pictures of me squinting and hunched over and walking through Times Square trying to reenact and be James Dean, trying to reenact that picture. And, if I would have just been myself, it probably would have been a decent picture, but I look like a moron. So silly, imitating, maybe that can be fun, and maybe it's not such a great idea. I don't know. One influence, though, of imitation is that, when Superman came out, and Superman 2 with Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder, Clark Kent and Lois Lane made working at a newspaper look so cool. I just loved the office and the office environment and those glass walls, and I don't know, it was just something about that environment that looked really cool. And so that kind of inspired me to join the high school newspaper and be a part of that, which was a great decision because I had lots of fun. So, sometimes movies and TV and books can influence us in good ways, and sometimes not so good ways, and I don't know. It's just really interesting how Hollywood entertainment and now social media can influence us with, one video, one line, and influence, what we buy and how we behave and what we do, and maybe influence our career decisions. And it's just very interesting to me, the merlot effect, or, the sideways effect. Just, it can influence markets. And it can influence the way you see things. I mean, one line in a movie can change the course of your life. It's amazing. And I'm curious what your thoughts on this are. How do you think movies and entertainment have influenced society? How have they influenced your lives? Is there a movie or a book or a TV show where somebody said something Or, you know, you watched it and it just changed your life, changed the direction in your life, and or influenced how you bought or what you bought, or, you know, that character drinks that kind of soda, so you start drinking that kind of soda. I'm curious how entertainment has influenced your life, and now social media. So anyway, that's just what's been on my mind this week, and I would love to know your opinions on the Merlot effect. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me this week, and I will see you next week with another wonderful video, hopefully, of just, you know, whatever's on my mind as I try to imitate Christian Slater and pump up the volume. Probably not as well, but, you know, I do my best. So anyway, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next week. And if this video has any kind of Merlot effect, I hope it's a positive one.